Hi everyone. Today we did get a bigger move higher off of this 200 area. We came right to the resistance once again, which is that 604.54 area, rejected from there, tried to have a feeble bounce, and you can see that is starting to sell a little bit after hours. So this seems to be the top of the range. Right now that 200 is your support. So based on this, we've seen the rejection. This should sell back down into this area here. But let's take a look at all of the charts and see if we can find any more information. Do me a quick favor and like and subscribe and watch the video till the end to help out the channel, and let's get started. In news today, the Iran-Israeli conflict continues to go on here, entering its fourth day. They continue to trade shots. There's been tons of videos all over social media of engagements going back and forth and missiles raining down on Tel Aviv. But does this mean anything for the economy? Oil prices have absolutely fluctuated on this, but I think everyone's really holding their breath to see if we get further engagement from other major parties in the region. Will the United States become a bigger part of this? Hopefully not, but that is the concern right now. It seems to be relatively isolated. The Iron Dome seems to be a little bit less effective than it had been recently. And you got Israel claiming they have full aerial dominance over Tehran's skies, which may or may not be true. But if they have deployed 50 fighter jets over Tehran, then they would be able to do that. But for now, the impacts to the economy and to the stock market seem to be minimal. And then in lighter news, you got the Trump Organization. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but is that a business? Saying that they are announcing a mobile plan and a $500 smartphone. This seems to be a bit of a backlash towards Apple, who said they can't move their manufacturing over here, and if they did, it would be far too expensive. But now you have Trump trying to come in and undercut everyone at a $500 smartphone expected to launch later this year. Do they actually have the ability to do this? Should they probably jump onto a project more like the X phone, which has been floated by Elon a few times? It'll be interesting to see if this comes to reality. Also seems a little bit weird that the quote-unquote Trump Organization is doing business deals while he is the sitting president, but we'll see. You got Trump Mobile offering $47.45 per month for unlimited talk, text, and data, as well as roadside benefits for telehealth and pharma benefits. So we'll see if that comes to reality. Just entertaining, not really a huge impact on the markets. Moving over to fear and greed, this stepped up from a 59 to a 62, a little bit of a flatlining here on the indicators. Breadth flat, put call ratio also flat, but in greed, volatility continued to go a little bit higher there. We'll take a look at that later. Safe haven demand still in greed, junk bond still in greed. So not a whole lot of movement, plenty of opportunity for markets to go lower. The only metric in fear is the momentum indicator, which seems to be ridiculous since we are just off of all-time highs. I would argue the momentum is still to the upside, but it is fading here, at least in the short term. Looking at seasonality here, understand a little bit of a step up into tomorrow is potentially the play, but understand that we are still expected to go lower up until the 24th. That is the low of the month, and then it's kind of sideways choppy into the end of the month. So right now, bearish thesis based on seasonality. Moving over to the economic calendar, you can see basically nothing for today. 20-year bond auction, a little bit lower than the previous number. Interesting. For tomorrow, you got core and headline retail sales. That could be interesting. 5-year tips, want to see what that comes in at. And then Atlanta Fed GDP, been watching that one a little bit more recently. Still a pretty good number here. This has fluctuated a lot. I would like to see it come in that area. And then don't forget the Wednesday interest rate decision, FOMC statement, the big one for the week. Moving over to Max Pain, you can see this is a quad witching week with tons and tons of options in the market. Max Pain is still 580, still expecting to get a lot closer to that for the end of the week. And then you got 600, big call wall there, and not expecting to stay above that either, obviously, as we continue to drift towards 580 for the end of the week. So do we hold up right now while we're waiting for the FOMC and get closer to that Friday expiration? Certainly a possibility, but in terms of a finish, I think 580 to 585 is probably where we end up. Moving over to the charts here, you can see the SPY chart did go up towards that 604.54 area. That was your resistance. Once again, the same resistance that we saw from the 11th and 12th last week. Gap down, gap up into this zone. And then look at that after hours price action. Big selling here, continues to go lower, down about a third on each of those candles. So a little bit over 0.5% in selling action towards that 597 area. 200 SMA continues to be support, touched it here Friday, touched it towards the end of that Friday session as well before we got the push up. Again, testing that high, not quite all the way there, so you could argue maybe high, slightly lower high here, but either way, I would call this consolidation. Moving over to the Tasty charts here, you can see that did push us back into bullish conditions with that first candle pushing through that trailing stop. So now this is choppy conditions. You can see bullish to bearish to bullish to bearish, back to bullish. You could argue it was even a little choppy in here. You had bearish conditions back on the 5th, but for now, this is sideways choppy at best. Seems to be consolidation. Volume coming through. Look at that selling in the after hours. Seems to be accelerating down a little bit over $1 on the charts. Your trailing stop, 599.01. I would expect to get below there. I think we'll go down to 597. I think we can go here as well. And then that lowest ATR band on the short time frame would be 595.39, so in line with that level that we just talked about. Moving over to the NASDAQ, similar thesis, looks like a gap down, gap up, retesting this zone here. You can see I was watching this area. We did come up, test those trends. Similar thesis on the RSI, came up, retested that area, didn't quite get the touch, but looking at that hourly chart, same setup, breakdown, retest, breakdown, after hours, big selling on that candle, down about a third or about $2. I honestly expected that to happen during the session, but it is finally happening here in the after hours. Kind of looks like a very similar setup to what we had back here as well, where you had a fall after hours, ended up getting a gap down to this area. Probably what we're going to see. My next level is going to be that 523.24 area. You got some trend support in here, 526.80 or so, and then that next zone would be that 523, 524 area. Momentum, very bearish. RSI, big breakdown with that after hours movement. It'll be interesting to see where this closes before the session is over. Moving over to the Tasty charts here, you can see push through this trailing stop, 531.42. Got all the way up to that upper ATR band, had a long consolidation during the session, and then a sell here at the end. Do we pull back to the trailing stop? 530.28, I think, is in play. Pretty much in line with this previous trailing stop. You also have the trailing stop back here, 531.66, so this seems to be the middle of the range. I would expect to at least pull back to there. Realistically, I wanted this to go back down to that lowest ATR band, which was closer to 525, 526. But we ended up getting a really powerful push, retesting this high back here, and it seems to be that we are ultimately going to reject lower. Again, similar setup here, looking for a test of that lowest ATR band. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow here, you can see both of these had an okay day. The Russell gapped up and rallied right to that next level to 1188, touched that level and then rejected. Momentum is still bearish. RSI still a little bit bearish below that SMA. Still looking at this to be kind of a left shoulder head, right shoulder. Maybe it's a little bit canted here, the neckline. Still a lot lower than current price, but we'll see. And then looking at the Dow, similar thesis, gapped up, hit that next level, 426.20, closed right at it, 426.28, and then after hours seeing a little bit of a drift lower, about $1 lower there, starting to see that fall, momentum bearish, RSI still bearish. So today didn't really change my thesis at all, just a little bit surprising how powerful of a day it was. Moving over to the Mag 7 here, you can see the Mag 7 did actually have a pretty good day, couldn't get above the high from the 11th, but we are back into this zone of resistance. Hopefully we get a rejection here, starting to see just a smidgen of movement after hours like everything else, but was a pretty good day. Gap down, gap up. Usually that's a bullish move. Momentum a little bit bullish. RSI getting above the SMA there, so this is at least consolidation. While price is continuing to go higher towards that highly traded zone, honestly that looks a little bit bullish, and I'll be watching this one closely tomorrow. Hopefully we see a little bit more selling in the after hours. Moving over to Apple and Microsoft here, you got Apple up about 1%, again giving a lot of that back after hours, but either way up a little bit. Momentum hanging in there. RSI still mid. Really don't have any direction for this. Continues to sideways chop, and then you got Microsoft just continuing to go straight up, although in the after hours it is down about $3, which is most of the gains for the day. Momentum neutral. RSI still super overbought, but continues to be a very bullish structure. Moving over to Tesla and NVIDIA, both of these gapping up a little bit and not really going a whole lot of anywhere after that, so up about 1% right into this consolidation range, hitting that RSI on the SMA. This is what we were looking for. A retest of this area and then a rejection from there, still expecting it to reject from there. Momentum bearish here on NVIDIA, same thesis on the RSI as what we saw on the major indices. Breakdown, looking for a little bit of a retest, super overbought, just can't seem to go any higher, at least for now. As long as 140.76 holds, I would call it still bullish, which has still held up quite well. Is it going to make it all the way to 149.65? 165. Not really sure, but that would be the price target if you're trading this to the bull side. Moving over to staples and discretionaries, really no movement on either of these. Discretionaries went a little bit higher, but not a lot. Same with staples coming off of that 200. Momentum still bearish, RSI still bearish, but basically flat on the day. Really no play either to the risk on or risk off sides for today. Moving over to breadth. Breadth did go a little bit higher, but not by much. You can see we're in this kind of same middle range that we've been at for 20-day breadth here, back in that 50 range. And then looking at the 50-day average, back into the same range we've been in, just above that 20, but below the level 77.46. Waiting to see if it rejects back below that 200. 21 EMA, momentum bearish, RSI still bearish. I still believe that it's going to. I still think this is a top. It's just taking its sweet time. Moving over to bonds, J&K basically unchanged as it has been for the last couple of weeks here. Still below the 200, but still above everything else. And then you got TLT selling off a little bit more here today, down about 1%, back into that buy range below 85.90. Still like it in here. Does it go a little bit lower into this kind of 83.84 area, 82.60, that next support? But either way, still like this over the next couple months to couple years. Moving over to the VIX here, you can see we fell just a little bit on the day. Gap up, gap down, right to this zone here, right at the 21. EMA right at the level 1850. So a little bit of a hesitation, but still holding at some zones of support. Still expecting this to kind of rally through. Doesn't mean you can't have any pullbacks, just like this, where you rallied up. 2 days of pullback, got a huge continuation, rally up, pause day, big continuation with a little bit of chop in there. So not saying that this thesis is broken by any means. I still believe we're going to this kind of 28 to 33 area in here. Then moving over to my accounts, as you would suspect, I was down the 900 from before. We were up 900 and then back down 900. I did take a few trades, which I made a very small amount of money on. And then you can see in the after hours, we're falling about $2. So that should put us back into a little bit more profitable position. I also rolled out here to 515. For basically the same credit there at 29.10, so a little bit less of a credit than I had on the previous position, but I did roll out for about a 50 cents credit, did not pay a debit on that. So again, collecting a little bit more credit, giving myself a little bit more room on the call side and a little bit more time. I still believe that we're going to go lower, so I still want to continue to trade that thesis, and nothing here today changed my thesis, despite it being a little bit more aggressive than I would have guessed. Let me know down in the comment section what you think of the Iran-Israel conflict. Also, what do you think of Trump Mobile? Are you going to be moving mobile carriers to his $500 smartphone? Let me know. Otherwise, like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video. Make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.